Season 3 of The White Lotus is in the books, and now we know what happened, so let's dive into the finale and the season as a whole. So the finale has come and gone, and we now know who ends up face down and face up in the water after the shootout. But if you haven't watched the finale, go watch it, then come back, and we'll unpack everything that happened this season. So first, let's focus on the final episode. So there were a lot of storylines with the White Lotus each season, and they slowly start to weave together, and that happened even more here as we got closer to the final moments of the shootout. While all the stories are interwoven, let's start with the Ratliffs. So we see Piper and Lachlan heading back from the monastery, and Lachlan still has his mindset on staying behind with Piper, but Piper doesn't really want him to, as she doesn't want to take any responsibility for ruining his life. They get back, and Lachlan kind of goes back into his little bubble, and Piper explains that, look, I didn't like staying at the monastery after all because I didn't have the material comforts that I have at home, with her wealthy family. We all know that that's about to come crashing down, and obviously Timothy does too, but Victoria takes a victory lap and is happy to hear all of that. But honestly, I don't think a lot of that conversation was genuine. I think a lot of it was, look, I don't want to drag Lachlan down with me, so I'm going to act like it sucks there for his sake more so than actually being truthful. She was all in and had to know exactly what life was going to be like there before she went. There's no way she just woke up one morning and said, I want to live at this place for a year, and then tricked her family into going to Thailand. She was real quick to shut it all down because, the food wasn't organic and the bed wasn't comfortable. I kind of call BS on that. I think she was just doing it to save Lachlan and realizing that, maybe her family needs her more than she needed to get away from her family. Meanwhile, in a complete twist, Saxon is now kind of becoming the bookworm and reads the books that Chelsea lent him, but is still not happy about what happened between him and Lachlan and Chloe. Lachlan tells Saxon, look, I'm a people pleaser and I just want everybody to be happy, but Saxon says, hey man, let's just forget it and try to move on. Timothy then comes in and he asks Lachlan, hey, could you live without money? And Lachlan says, yeah, I think I could. So that right there ends up being what we thought was going to end up saving Lachlan. Then Timothy goes out, collects the fruit from the tree that we hear at the beginning of the season can kill you, and he confirms it, again, with Pam that yes, it can kill you. And then he uses the seeds to make awful pina coladas for everyone except for Lachlan, who he makes drink a Coke. But because the pina coladas were awful, that may have saved everybody's life, although they did take a couple of sips and had no repercussion from it. Timothy has regrets, knocks Saxon's drink out of his hands, and tells the whole family, hey, don't drink these. I actually don't want to kill you after all. The next morning, though, Lachlan decides he wants to make a smoothie to be more like a man and be more like Saxon, and he uses the dirty blender from the night before with all the seed remnants in it. Part of me is like, dude, are you really not going to wash that out after everybody talked about how gross the pina coladas were? And then part of me is thinking like, hey, this is him being sneaky and getting a sip of an adult drink and then becoming more adult by doing so. Something that, he's kind of been trying to do the whole season. He makes a smoothie, blends up the rest of the seeds, and drinks the whole thing, and we think he's about to die. He throws up, he passes out, and we see a vision of him drowning. And just like that, death number 1 in the White Lotus. Except it's not. Timothy wakes up after sleeping in, goes to find him, tries to wake him up, and he does end up waking up, throwing up a bit more, but ultimately being fine. I honestly wasn't a big fan of that, but I'll get to that more in a second. Next, on to Rick and Chelsea. So Rick comes back from Bangkok and leaves Frank in the middle of a drug and alcohol-fueled party. He reunites with Chelsea happily on the beach, a scene that a lot of people said, oh, they must die because that scene is clearly like a dream sequence. Well, that scene was not a dream sequence. Finally, Rick has some closure about his dad, and they seem like they're set to live a life happily ever after. That is until the Hollanders show up at the hotel because they want to take a picture with Jacqueline before she leaves and goes home. Jim spots Rick at the buffet and confronts him and tells Rick, look, your mom's a liar, your father was not a good man, and you didn't miss out on much by growing up without him. Jim then flashes a gun he has and a holster in his jacket so that Rick won't do anything stupid. I feel like everybody was on the bandwagon that Jim was actually Rick's father, and if you watch my recaps, I've been saying it for weeks too, but it seems like at this point that maybe that's not the case. This all makes Rick lose his mind and all the closure that he got, and so he decides to go crazy again. Rick goes back to Chelsea, who begs him not to do anything stupid again. But the bodyguards start to come after Rick, and he goes on the run. He tries to find Amrita, who he had done a few meditation sessions with before to try to clear his mind and figure out what to do, but she is about to go and do one with Zion, which is the one we see at the beginning of the show. So she tells him, wait for her. He does wait, but then he sees the Hollanders nearby taking their photo with Jacqueline, so he decides, screw it, I'm going to go finish this. He goes, grabs the gun out of the holster that Jim has, and shoots him in the chest twice. Sitala tells Rick that Jim was indeed his father and that the whole thing had been explained to her after Rick and Frank left their house. The bodyguards then come after Rick, and so the shootout has begun. Chelsea, of course, rounds the corner as it starts, and Rick grabs her and hides, but after Rick kills the bodyguards, and it's a hell of a shot, by the way, he looks over and sees that Chelsea has been shot. As he tries to carry her to get help, Gaitak comes, and Shitala demands that he kill Rick. He does hesitate a little bit, but as Rick is walking slowly away with Chelsea's body, he does indeed shoot him and kill him. The two fall into the water, and in perfect yin and yang fashion, one face up, one face down, both Rick and Chelsea are dead. I know I predicted that no main characters would die. Whoops. But I did think that if either of those two died, it would have been Chelsea. Exactly how she did die, but it would maybe then start Rick down a good path, and ultimately her optimism and hopefulness would win in that way when she talked about one of us is going to win over the other. Hopefulness versus pessimism, optimism versus being so depressed all the time. But I guess neither one of them won. Although I guess Rick's overreaction and pessimism is really what got them killed. As for the three girls, they were somewhat involved in the storyline at the end, as Jacqueline was the one taking her photo with the Hollanders when the shootout happened. However, they all got away fine. We see them talk to each other one last time the night before, as Kate and Jacqueline say they were so happy during the trip and that they loved the others. But Laurie says, look, I was incredibly sad the whole trip. And she basically talks about how she struggled to find meaning through her work, her love life, and being a mother, but eventually came around to realizing that those friendships are actually what truly gave her life meaning. She admits that she hooked up with Alexi as well, but nothing really came from that part of the story. Gaitak, meanwhile, tells Mook that he knows who the robbers are, and he subtly reveals to Valentin that he knows it was him and his friends after spotting them at the fight. Valentin begs Gaitak, hey, don't say anything because we could all get deported and go back to Russia where we face certain death. So Gaitak doesn't say anything. He tries to resign, but is told, hey, you're at least a good worker and we don't want to lose that. I do feel like maybe he should just go work the front desk or be the concierge or something instead of a security guard. He could take Fabian's place. Fabian was kind of a dud this season. We'll get into that in a second. Of course, it plays out that he's the one that shoots Rick, and Sitala makes him part of her security detail, and that makes Mook a little more on board with him. He wanted to take her on another date earlier in the episode, but when he says he wants to quit, she shoots him down. So I guess Mook only wants to be with a hothead who is willing to fire a gun, apparently. Mook was a character that just did not work for me to be such a big star, and Lisa coming in to play that role. I feel like she was just kind of a random character that was there with no development whatsoever, and I guess just wants to be with Gaitak because he shot somebody finally. I don't know. I didn't really like her character this season. And then finally, we see the whole shootout through Zion's eyes at the beginning, and of course, he's worried about his mom, Belinda, and now we know it's because she's been trying to make this deal with Greg. Zion decides, hey, I'm going to go over there and speak for you and demand $5 million instead of the $100,000 that Greg was going to give her before. Greg refuses, but Zion eventually gets him to agree, and the money ends up in her account a few hours later. She decides to get the heck out of Dodge, which I don't blame her, and goes to wrap up the loose end of Pornchai. She tells Pornchai, hey, my circumstances have changed, basically saying word for word what Tanya said to her in season 1, saying, I just really can't commit to anything right now. As the episode ends, the Ratliffs and Jacqueline, Kate, and Laurie all get on the boat to go home. The Ratliffs get their phones back, and before they can see anything, Timothy tells his family, hey, everything's about to change, but we'll get through it together because family is the most important thing. They all look at their phones and see what has happened and kind of look up in disgust at him, especially Saxon, and that's the last we see. But do they even know what just happened? We really don't see the reaction to A, Lachlan waking up, or B, the shooting from the angle of the Ratliffs. They just get on the boat and it's like, oh yeah, we're going to lose everything. And then we're left thinking, wait, does Lachlan need to go to the hospital for just drinking all of that? Did you not see that like 5 people were just murdered a few feet away from y'all? It's kind of weird that they don't really acknowledge the shooting. Meanwhile, Belinda and Zion get on their own boat, waving to the staff as they leave. Once again, the staff acting like nothing happened, including a sad Pornchai standing there waving goodbye. Rick and Chelsea's bodies are shown being wheeled to an airplane in body bags. Gaitak is shown now as a member of the security detail, wearing black to show his full turn to the dark side, and he hugs Mook and gets in a fancy car with Shitala. And Greg is shown agreeing to Chloe, finding another guy to play out their sexual encounter they wanted Saxon to do earlier, but he didn't. And that's basically a wrap for season 3. So now we can look back on the whole season, and I would probably rank this season 3rd of the 3. That's not saying I thought it was bad. I just think season 2 was the best, and season 1 kind of had that new magic to it, and then you have season 3. I do think this season was missing Jennifer Coolidge, and I do hope they keep that storyline somewhat alive in season 4, either through Belinda, through Greg, maybe even Zion, or bring her assistant Portia back. The death in season 1 was an accidental stabbing. Season 2 saw a shootout and then kind of a second oopsie death away from the main deaths. I consider Jennifer Coolidge shooting all the guys in the ship as the main death, and then her death, although being basically the main character, was kind of a secondary oopsie kind of death. I was kind of hoping for that here, and we almost had it with Lachlan. And this sounds bad, but I do wish he had died. It would have made the Ratliff storyline end much differently. I still don't think they even know about the seeds and that he was trying to kill them, and I don't know that they ever will. But if Lachlan had died, it would have made the whole, guys, we're going to be dealing with some stuff at home, even more serious. I know it's a much darker ending than what we got with the whole it's okay because we're all a happy family. I just would have preferred he actually died for the family to have some real consequences before they even left the resort after seeing how things played out this whole season. I know not everybody at the resort is supposed to be wrapped up in the murder aspect of the show, but the one storyline I didn't really care for as much was the three girlfriends. I like all the actresses individually, especially Carrie Coon, but it just didn't do much for me. However, my wife was the opposite. She loved that storyline the most. I've seen a lot of people point out that, look, this isn't supposed to be a murder mystery. It's supposed to be a character study. And honestly, I think it's kind of both. And it's okay to be both. But there are two major plot points with the three girlfriends we never see tied up that I think we're all kind of left curious about. The first is the conversation between Victoria and Kate about the baby shower they met at like 10 years ago. It's something we all instantly took notice of and realized how awkward it was and spent the whole season thinking, oh man, I can't wait to see why that was so awkward. I wonder what happened. And I can't wait to see it be brought up again, but it never was brought up again. It was just something that stood out so much that it was weird that nobody ever said a word about it after that. The second is the Russian storyline. They're clearly out to scam people, including those girls, and they robbed the hotel, but nothing really ever came of any of that. Valentin ultimately got away with it, and Laurie never really mentioned the fact that she was getting scammed by Alexei. The whole Russian storyline just kind of fizzled. And I know the story is about the girls, not the Russians, but the Russians kind of fit into multiple angles of the story to then have no resolution at the end with them. I feel now that Guy Talk is part of the security detail, he should have definitely said something. Just a clip of Valentin being shown the door or walking out in handcuffs after Guy Talk made the switch to be a security guard, that's all I would need to actually wrap that storyline up. Also, in the first two seasons, pivotal parts of the story involved the managers of the resorts. In season 1, Armand was a main character, arguably the main character, and is the one who gets killed, being a large part of the story. In season 2, Valentina is a no-nonsense manager who's controlling multiple aspects of the storyline, including the two sex workers that are trying to mingle with the guests. But in season 3, Fabian was just kind of there, and only popped in a handful of times for random reasons. His nervousness to be a singer didn't really fit in anywhere, and then when the shooting happened, he just kind of fell in the water, and that was it. The two things that helped the first two seasons out, on top of the incredible cast, were the Jennifer Coolidge storyline, which was carried on but without her, and then a strong manager being the glue that holds everything together at the hotel because they do ultimately interact with all the guests. So I think season 4 needs to bring back a strong manager wherever it may be and whoever that may be. All in all, I'd give this season about a 7 out of 10. It's not bad by any means, it just doesn't have quite the same magic as the first two seasons. I'd give the first season around an 8 out of 10, and I'd basically give season 2 a perfect score. I'd say the top tier characters in this season, for me personally, were Chelsea, I like Saxon, and I like Victoria. Next would be Laurie, Lachlan, Piper, Belinda, and Greg. Then everyone else is kind of behind them. I like the storyline of Saxon and Lachlan almost kind of turning into each other. Saxon started reading and trying to take in more of the world while sitting back and observing, and Lachlan started trying to go and do more and become more of a man. I like shots of them from the beginning and the end. At first, Saxon kind of has his cool guy sunglasses on while Lachlan is the nerd. Then on the way back, Lachlan has his sunglasses on, being a cooler guy in the place Saxon was in, and Saxon is in Lachlan's place reading a book and looking more like a nerd. I also like Piper's reserved, quiet look at the beginning and then her more colorful, free-spirited look at the end. Supposedly, there's even more of a reason for her being like that we didn't see. Mike White said in the White Lotus podcast that there actually was a deleted scene in the finale that saw Piper and Zion hook up because after leaving the monastery, Piper felt like she needed to lose her virginity to be more normal. So she scoped out the resort, found Zion, and they did it. I did notice it, and I pointed out to my wife while we were watching, but there's a scene where her and Saxon come back to the room, and she's wearing brighter colors, and her hair is all messed up, and she kind of looks disheveled. It's a complete different look than she had all season long, and it looked like she had just been like at a rager or something. But now I know why. And it also adds on to why she looks like this on the boat out. I didn't dislike Timothy, but they spent too much time making him drugged out to actually have him deal with anything. I know him being drugged out was a purposeful choice so he didn't have to deal with anything, but it made him kind of be a boring and dull character after what was, I thought, a strong start. And Victoria is top tier really only for the one-liners and memes coming from her performance. She was the one that probably made you laugh the most. I thought I was going to love Rick and dislike Chelsea at first. Walton Goggins is on a tear right now. I really like him as Baby Billy on The Righteous Gemstones, and he was really good in Fallout, but I ended up not liking his arc quite as much. However, Chelsea ended up surprising me, and her storyline weaving in with Rick, Chloe, and Saxon I thought was really good. She's really the only one you're sad to see go at the end of the season. I've mentioned I didn't really care for the three girls storyline, but like I said before, I do like all of the actresses, and I've really liked Carrie Coon ever since The Leftovers. It was well acted, I just didn't really care about the story they were acting in. I thought the Tanya storyline with Belinda and Greg was okay, but I do feel like there's still some of that left to play out. Does Greg really just go back into hiding like nothing's wrong, and does Belinda now go into hiding of her own? And now what will the tie be in the future, if any, to Tanya? I didn't think killing her was a bad choice before, and it definitely added some shock value to season 2, but now the show is missing her, I think. My wife and I were talking, and we randomly came up with the fact that we'd love to see someone like Jennifer Tilly come on the show and play her sister in season 4. So all in all, it was pretty good, but it probably could have been a little better. So what did you think of season 3, and which characters did you like and did you dislike the most? And who would you love to see on season 4? Let me know in the comments, and make sure to subscribe to the channel as we now turn our attention to The Last of Us Season 2, and of course continue to review and recaps all kinds of great TV shows and movies right here on The Pop Culture Life.